Right. Now I think that's really all the questions.
Okay.
So General Paxton, you're recognized.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Huffman, Vice Chair Hinojosa, and Senators. I am Attorney General Ken Paxton, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today to discuss our agency's budget. So I look up here, this is my sixth time presenting to this committee, and I think I've still served with most of you either in the House or the Senate, so a few exceptions to that. As the state's chief legal officer, is my agency's mission to champion liberty and justice for Texas. I take this mission seriously, and the Office of the Attorney General is committed to performing its duties with excellence. Our agency's core functions are: 1, providing legal representation to the state, its officials, and agencies; 2, serving the children of Texas through the enforcement of the state's child support laws; 3, securing justice for Texans; 4, protecting Texans from fraud, waste, and abuse; and finally, safeguarding the freedoms of Texans as guaranteed by the United States and Texas constitutions. Today, my office is currently litigating almost 32,000 cases. Through pre-litigation advice and the vigorous defense of the state's laws, my office has not only repeatedly avoided and minimized costly claims for the state, but has also been a massive source of revenue for Texas. I've been blessed to serve as the state's Attorney General for 10 years, and in my time, Senator Bennett Corp, we have recovered almost $6.8 billion for the taxpayers. $1.8 billion of this was in 2024 alone, and I think over the last 4 years, it's about $4.4 billion. The work of my office helps fund programs like the Opioid Abatement Fund and the Jack Pope Act. Just this past July, I was able to secure $1.4 billion settlement with Meta to stop the company's practice of capturing and using the personal biometric data of millions of Texans without their consent. This is the largest settlement ever obtained by a single state against a single company. Not only is this settlement historic, but it demonstrates the hard work and commitment of my office for standing up for the rights of Texans against some of the world's biggest tech companies. The OAG's legal divisions raise substantially more revenue than they need to operate, providing a direct return of almost $3 for every dollar used to operate. That's almost $400 million per year on a $150 million annual budget, with greater than 1/4 of the budget self-funded by attorney's fees. Additionally, my office has collected nearly $44.2 billion in child support. I'm very proud of our child support division. It is officially ranked the best, the most effective and efficient child support agency by the federal government in all 50 states. Turning to our LAR, we had 4 exceptional items in total. First, and most importantly, the investment in my staff has proven itself, and we are uniquely situated to continue producing high levels of return on your investment in OAG operations. I ask that you continue to support them in the work that they do for Texas. When the bill you worked for years to pass is challenged in court, I know you want the best talent possible defending it. By keeping us competitive in the market, we will continue to recruit and retain highly skilled professionals. As such, I'm requesting a 6% salary increase for 2026 and the same in 2027. I've come every time that I've asked for the salary increase. What I've suggested is look at the results, and if we don't produce, then don't give it. But if we produce, let me keep the talent that I have to represent the state, because it pays off. Our second and third requests are to ensure that my agency is able to keep up with our ever-increasing demand on this state's law enforcement needs by ensuring adequate funding and staffing for our Criminal Investigation Division and Medicaid Fraud Control Unit in pursuit of protecting Texas communities. Why do we need this? Here's an example. In the state of Texas, outside of Dallas and Houston, the only state agency responding to new allegations of child pornography via the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force is the Texas AG's office. It is important that we have proper staffing to respond to these voluminous reports of sexual assaults on children, because behind each new video is a child victim. Lastly, we are requesting that the legislature continue the technological investment in OAG's legal services workforce by leveraging the full potential of OAG's unified legal case management system. This investment will streamline operations, enhance collaborations, and deliver legal services more effectively and timely. Separate and apart from our asks, I regret to inform the committee that the LBB staff made a substantial error in OAG's budget that decreased funding to child support, Medicaid fraud investigations, and crime victim services, which I know was not the intent of this committee. In conversations with LBB staff, they were unable to explain the reasoning for this $38 million cut, which guts those 3 purposes. I'm certain that these changes must have been a mistake, because this body has always supported these initiatives. I ask this committee to support the proposed rider to restore this funding. Before I close, I'd like to discuss one final item, the historic $1.4 $1.4 billion meta settlement and this payment to outside counsel. My office goes toe-to-toe in cases against some of the largest corporations in the world, including Meta, Google, Pfizer, General Motors, 3M, DuPont, TikTok, and BlackRock, to name a few. These parties have practically unlimited resources that could swamp most legal teams and delay effective enforcement. The OAG has a proven track record of litigation, wins against the toughest opponents. However, without the assistance of outside counsel, we do not have the resources to successfully litigate every righteous claim that we have. It is imperative that these bills be paid because without these firms, this judgment would not have been rendered. Funding for the payments was specifically secured as part of the settlement and is available to be distributed today. The money is residing in an OAG suspense account in state treasury dedicated for this purpose, and any delay in payment causes further interest to accrue against the state. Refusing to pay these bills would create a chilling effect and jeopardize the state's ability, including other state agencies and universities, to secure outside counsel in the future. I appreciate the opportunity to make this presentation and look forward to answering your questions. I have other people obviously here for specific questions that I may not be as familiar with.
Okay, Senator West.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And let's start where you stopped off in terms of the, first of all, congratulations on the settlement. Over $1.4 billion, is that how much it was?
That was the number.
The largest in the history of this country?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And McCool Smith, I'm familiar with them. They're a Dallas-based firm, and I think they were joined by a co-counsel also. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Would you tell the members what arrangements you had with them as it relates to the contract? Was it a contingency fee contract? What were the provisions?
Yeah, so let me give you a little background. These cases, after I ran my first term, this was my focus. I had so many complaints from constituents about these big tech companies and what they were doing, how they were dealing with our privacy, our data, potential censorship. And so I started looking into this. I went out to Silicon Valley for about a year. I met with Stanford professors that were experts on this. I met with lawyers. I met with antitrust lawyers. I met with as many people that I could meet with to try to understand what these companies were doing. Well, we came back after a year of doing that, and we developed some of these cases against Google, which we had 5 cases, Meta, TikTok, and others. And we still have cases that we've just filed that are not necessarily technology, but they're similar in what they're trying to accomplish. So we realized in doing this that we didn't have appropriations to do all this. As you're a lawyer, you know how this works. We have legal experts that we have to hire. We have experts in general that we have to hire. We have to fund a lot of expenses. We got some of that money for Google, but we didn't have it. We didn't have an appropriation for most of these cases. We didn't have time to wait, and we had authority to use an outside counsel contract. Now, it's kind of a mix. I don't understand all the nuances of it. I do know this, that we can't do a straight contingency contract. It's a mix of hourly rate, and it's negotiated. So we can give these attorneys up to 35%. You know how in the world of law, you're very familiar with this, contingency fee contracts are 35 to 40%. We negotiated a much lower level. I think this one for Meta turned out to be 10.2%. If we'd had a 35% contingency fee, we would have had to pay another $350 million. So we negotiated a relatively low level. They took all the risk, all the financial risk on these cases, and we didn't upfront any of these expert fees or any of the costs, which amounted to millions of dollars, and it allowed us to go forward with that, as well as when you take on these big tech companies, I mean, they can spend as much money as they want. They can hire as many attorneys as they want. They hire the best. So one of the challenges we have, these are specialized cases, and I wanted to make sure that we got the best talent out there. And the results speak for themselves, and I think if we can continue to pay these, there'll be more cases. We're in the middle of some of these other cases that will be similar, I believe, in result if we make sure that we compensate our lawyers.
Okay, and I think that the attorney's fees, this was what, $142 million?
I think that's the number. I don't have the number in front of me, but I have people that know the exact amount.
Okay. You're requesting a right authority to address the gap between the authority of the LBB as pursuant to the government code to approve outside counsel contingency contracts when the legislature is not in session.
Yes, that is directed at the problem we have. We have cases that we need to pursue immediately, or getting a legislative appropriation or permission is a long process and may never occur because of the timing.
And what are you asking for?
The writer, do you know more about that particular request?
The bigger issue. Oh, sorry, I apologize. Senators Brent Webster, I'm the first Assistant Attorney General. Thank you for having me today. The goal is we're probably going to enter into settlements or go to trial with some of these cases and have large judgments as a result of that. Our concern is interest accrues during that time, and if there's a way or a pathway where if we comply with the statute, which we have in this case, that the legislature passed, that outlines how these contingency fee contracts work, if we comply with that and it's within proper approvals by the comptroller and anyone else that's outlined in the rider, then we would be able to pay out these fees before the next legislative session begins, which will save the state a substantial amount of interest, especially when you're talking about cases.
Is that a problem right now or what?
Well, the payment of this case has been delayed. This case settled, I believe, in the spring. And I believe interest has been accruing after a certain time period according to statute where the state's obligated for that interest. So we're mainly looking out for the state's interest here and hoping to pay this out quickly in the future.
So it's just the payment of it? I'm not, maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying. You're saying because you have to go through an LBB process that it kind of delays closure, I guess you could say, of the settlement, or what?
Well, so there's two different aspects to this. First of all is the meta settlement, which we're asking the legislature to pass funding for. The rider addresses what may happen in the future with future cases that may settle in between a legislative session, where it creates a process where we don't have to wait for the next legislative session to pay that amount.
So there is not a problem right now, and you're just asking for a process in the future.
Well, I guess a problem in the sense that we're asking for the meta bill, the attorney fees bill, to be paid by the legislature. That's the initial problem we're asking to solve. And the future problem would be in the future, in cases like this where we complied with the statute as passed, there's a pathway to pay that before the next legislative session occurs.
Yeah. All right. General Paxton, your presentation says that because of the LBB error, the LBB refuses to correct, you have a $38 million hole. I think you mentioned that.
Yes.
And you said that this all started because you wanted to do a method of finance swap on $16 million.
Yeah.
Could you explain that a little bit more?
I'm going to have my budget person. These finance swaps are crazy. I don't think any of us really understand, but she's the closest to trying to understand what they've actually done.
I actually understand it too, by the way,
You understand?
as does LPP.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Price. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Office of the Attorney General. The Office of the Attorney General in our appropriation request did a method of finance swap from General Revenue Dedicated Fund 469 for crime victim claim payments. We swapped that from that type of funding to federal funds because federal funds were going to expire. And there was a risk of the expiration, so we made the recommendation to fund with federal funds, and we moved that authority for general revenue over into other programs, therefore keeping our base budget the same. The LBB reduced our base budget by $38 million in the introduced bill.
Just to use federal, you swapped it with using.
And they reversed that. And it appears in reversing it that they've cut our budget $38 million in areas where the original swap was not performed. And I do think it's important to mention that the use of the federal funds was a responsibility of the Attorney General's office. We are the administrator of Fund 469, and we oversee the balance and have worked with the legislative body over the past several years on the fund balance. And so as the keeper of the funds, the recommendation from an administrative perspective was also made to use the federal funds rather than the Fund 469, preserving them for the future.
Okay, couple other questions. Item number 7 in LBB presentation talks about victim assistance grants. It's on page 6. I don't know whether you're the right person or someone else, General Paxton. How do I talk with someone to get a list of the nonprofits that you're providing grants to?
We can get that for you. Absolutely. We have that, and we will get it for you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure. And before we move on, just on this swap issue, it's clearly a very complicated issue. I just want to make it clear, it was never any intent to cut the AGs on your other services at all. We just didn't want you to swap the GR dedicated funds to the GR funds. We didn't want to do that for a lot of reasons. That was not an LBB decision. That was a decision by myself and Chairman Bonin, just so you know, okay? So I don't like people to get blamed that don't deserve the blame. But there was never any intent to cut you in any way. And in fact, anyone who knows me and my background would know I would never do anything to cut victims' compensation. So in fact, we have been funding that with additional funds since I was, workforce work group chair and conferee in this for several sessions. The money has never all been spent for various reasons. It's always way below target. Why the money can't get out, I don't know. I understand there's a lot of administrative hurdles. I get all that, so there's no blame here. And in fact, in the supplemental this time, which you can't see right now in the budget, we have $40 million in GR to give to that fund because of, we can't get the inmates' phone calls, fees, and so forth. So we always fluff up that fund, which we wanted to ensure its integrity. That's why we didn't want to do the swap. But I pledge we will sit down. I'll sit down, have the experts in this. I'm sure, Julie, would you agree to sit down and we will figure this out. If when they undid the swap, there was a mistake, nobody meant to make a mistake. So I don't want this to turn into some big drama because it's not. It's just we want to give you what you need. We want the victims to have what they need. We want to fully fund it. We don't want to lose federal funds. So let's all use our best minds to figure this out in a fair way. Everybody okay with that? I just don't think we need to bog down on. Y'all can ask any questions you want, of course, but I don't think we need to bog down on this when it's a non-issue that's going to be resolved. Okay? That's my statement, but anyone can ask whatever they want. Okay, let's see. Who's next? I believe Senator Zaffarini, then Senator Betancourt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, General.
Morning.
You heard the LBB talk about the landowners' compensation program and the decision not to request its continuation. If we were to fund it this session, do you have additional information that we could use to address the lack of demand or accessibility or the need for additional funding?
I think, Brent, Josh one. He's overseeing this particular program and knows more about it than anybody in our office, so I'll let him answer that question.
Good morning. My name is Josh Reno. I'm the Deputy Attorney General for Criminal Justice. Senator, I appreciate the question. I would like to, somewhat address just the wording of the question. The Attorney General's office in no way believes that this program should be ended or anything like that. The reason that we didn't request additional funding is because, as the chair pointed out, we have not spent the money. And the reason we haven't spent the money is because this program didn't exist when the legislature funded it and put it into existence. We propped it up within about 8 months with putting the rules, worked with our IT department to create something out of nothing. The numbers. We can get you the specific numbers. The biggest hurdles for any kind of program, because it mirrors a lot of the same requirements that was created by this legislature for crime victims' compensation. We're happy to work with the senators. If you want to give us the authority to pay out more, we're going to have to change the requirements of which have to be met. The two biggest pushbacks that we've gotten, and our team, and I want to introduce Lane Brown because Lane Brown is our division chief of crime victim services. You're going to see his face over here a lot, and he's happy to come over and talk to you guys. I will tell you that his team has been all over the state, talking to various different groups down on the border in rural Texas to make sure everybody understands what this program is and what we need in order to pay a bill. And the two biggest pushbacks that I've heard, just anecdotally, are that this has to be, these damages and ultimately our payments have to be related to a border crime. And some of the issues are that they're not getting relayed or reported to law enforcement, or that law enforcement, when they write up their report, is writing it up in a way that does not reflect that it is associated to a border crime. If it's not associated to a border crime, we can't make a payment. That application has to be denied. And so part of our outreach has been informing the law enforcement community as well as informing our Texans who are out the money that this is what is needed in order for us to pay that bill. The second thing that I've heard probably the most coming back just as it seeps up to me, and I'm 3 or 4 layers above this thing, is that a lot of folks out there, and I'm sure plenty of y'all have been in this situation, we have to be the payer of last resort. It's the exact same as our crime victims compensation. You've got to go through your insurance. If there's some other way of receiving payment, you've got to go there first. And so a lot of landowners have told us, I don't want to report this to my insurance company because I don't want my insurance premiums to go up because I reported it to the insurance company. I can't pay that bill. As much as I want to spend the 20 or 25 million that you guys gave us to run this program, I can't pay a bill because of the restraints that are on it. If you want to work with us and sit down and come up with different ways to pull back some of those restraints, we're happy to do it. I will tell you, I think the legislature set up a program that allows for us to pay landowners back for damages that they've incurred, and we've done it in a way that has some kind of accountability to making sure that we're not just handing out and fixing people's fences, okay? Because that's not what we want to be in the business for. We don't want to spend that $25 million just for every phone call because a fence goes down. And so there's got to be a fine line that we'll work with you and try to figure it out. But the only reason that the request was not made for more funding is because the funding is there. It's well funded. And we've got 2 years after we run out of money for this program to run and exist. And I assume that if we start getting closer to the end of this thing and we're starting to spend all the money, we will come back to the legislature and let you know, hey, this program's about to run out of funds, and we either need to re-up or make the decision that this is over. But nothing from the Attorney General's office is to communicate to this body that this is a program that we do not want to keep going. We want to keep it going.
Thank you. My understanding is that many of the landowners who were impacted were unaware that this program was available. You just mentioned that your representatives have gone out to talk about it. Has that been satisfactory to this date, or do we need additional community awareness programs?
Well, we've got one young lady who's out running around. I think we could probably do better. I always want, I hate to hear that folks don't even know that the program exists. And so to that extent, there's some more work that needs to be done, and we're happy to work with this body to figure out a way to do that and get the outreach out. I know we've got, we've got a pamphlet. We've got all sorts of stuff that we've put out on social media. We've been, like I said, to all of these different groups throughout the state. Obviously, there's some more work that needs to be done there.
Thank you so much. General Paxton, every session that I've been here, we have passed legislation regarding the Crime Victims Compensation Fund. Do you have information regarding the effectiveness and the cost efficiency of that legislation and what we can do to stabilize the fund this session?
So Josh oversees that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Can you ask the question again as far as the stabilization of the Crime Victims Compensation
I didn't
Fund?
have it written, so it might not be asked exactly the same.
No, it's a great question. I just want to make sure I
I
address
said
it.
that every session we have passed legislation regarding the Crime Victim Stabilization Fund and what has been the impact of that legislation cumulatively, and what can we do this session to ensure that we can stabilize that fund?
Sure. I would defer to our budget folks as far as what it looks like. I will tell you, since I've been here in 2020, what we have seen is, and grateful to this legislature for making attempts to stabilize that fund, because it's tied to different revenue sources and doesn't have kind of a fixed revenue source. You do kind of see some highs and lows. And so what I've seen is, because of the efforts of this legislature, that it has kind of stabilized. And I do think it's probably healthier than it has been for a while. But I get high-level overviews on the stuff, and so the budget team, LBB, could probably give you a better idea of what that looks like on a numbers perspective. But from what I've seen is it has stabilized just since I've been here, because I know that we were in a bit of a crisis when I first started back in 2020.
Thank you so much. General Paxton, regarding child support payments, does our level of funding enable your agency to respond timely to complaints about failure to pay child support?
I didn't hear something about I didn't hear the question.
I said regarding our child support programs, Does our level of funding enable your staff to respond timely to complaints about child support
Yeah,
payments?
I'm really pleased with what's happened with child support over the last, say, 4 years. We did a complete restructure. We changed a lot. It's become a lot more decentralized. And I remember you asked this a similar question about just hearing complaints 2 years ago. And I am the same, but I used to get more complaints about child support than all the other things combined when I started. And I would say in the last 2 years, I get one maybe every 6 months, and I'm out talking to people a lot. So I used to hear it all the time. I was like, even though we're ranked highly, I didn't understand, the bar doesn't seem high because we're still getting complaints. So we've decentralized. We've got, I think, the best leadership we've ever seen. We've changed so much in child support. Our technology's gotten better thanks to Tina and to Ruth Ann, who's actually, I think, sick today. That whole program has gotten so much better, and I'm so happy because I feel for these parents that need help, and I really wanted to make a difference in that program, even though it doesn't get a lot of publicity, but it does really matter.
Well, I agree with the improvements, thank you, because this used to be the number one complaint we heard about in my office, and we hardly hear about it anymore.
That is
I
a
wanted to know if you were
testament,
responding timely, it's excellent.
Senator Zephyrine, to just Ruth Ann Thornton, who runs this, and just the people that have come around to know the day-to-day and how to actually make this better. That's all I ever want to do, is leave it in a better place, and I got it. And I think we are far down the road in improving child support delivery, and just the whole program is, when I drop in on child support offices often, and I like to find out what's going on from people on the ground. And every office I've dropped in on since Ruth Ann took over, they tell me great things. This is the best it's ever been. And they love the fact that they have the ability to make more decisions and get things done faster. So we're trying to speed up the process because it was all getting stuck up in the bureaucracy. And we're trying to figure out how can we get these people help faster. And it has helped to have leadership that oversees it, but isn't making every single decision about everything.
Thank you. Yesterday, we heard testimony about the salaries of attorneys who work in the judicial branch. Are you aware of any comparison between the salaries received by your attorneys and their peers in the legislative or the judicial branch?
So I know there are people that know that better than I do. I do know that we lost a lot of attorneys in the last month to the Justice Department and to other Washington that pay more. So I always like to, because we are a profit center, I want to be as competitive as I can be to keep the talent so that we can keep doing those cases. We can represent the state in the most effective way. And I think we have proven that if we can keep compensation somewhat competitive, I mean, obviously the universities can pay a lot more than we can, but I've sought that. I want to get the best talent I can, and I think it pays off not just in bringing in money, but we also prevent huge losses to the state by defending cases where we could have huge losses. So, and we also just generally represent the legislature and other agencies in all kinds of ways that I think if you have the good talent, we win a lot of cases. We're good at it.
Thank you so much. Yesterday, we heard from the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, and Chair Huffman directed the director to tell us what the commission needed to do a better job. Senator Betancourt and I volunteered to work with them in carrying out the chair's directive. Who on your staff could work with us from the perspective of how the AG works with the Commission on Judicial Conduct?
Maybe Leslie French and Brent Webster to start with. Brent Webster, first assistant.
Are you volunteering them?
I am right now.
you.
He's in.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Colcourse, you're next.
Thank you. While we're talking about Crime Victims Fund, I believe there's statute limitations on how much money we can pay for, like, funerals and for other reimbursements. I, Madam Chair, had something very unfortunate. We all have crime victims in our district, but the DPS office it was a really domestic terror, actually, where 2 people were killed in that office when a gentleman drove an 18-wheeler through the Brenham office. Dealing with those families, y'all's office was excellent, General.
Thank you.
And there was, again, with any crime victim, a lot of hurt and a lot of pain. But I ran into some moments where I was like, wow, $6,000 for a funeral doesn't pay for the funeral, doesn't even get close to it. Do you believe it's time for us to update parts of the statute? And Madam Chair, this would be a cost to the bill, but I think it's been years since we've done some updating. Am I right on that?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, inflation has been significant over just the last 4 years, and it's affecting people's ability to deal with these issues. And as you know, they're not expecting to have to deal with a crime. And I think I think it's a good program, and I think what the state's doing is good, but it definitely needs to be updated as far as costs.
Good. I want to hit, if I could pivot, Madam Chair, I want to pivot to what you do in the OAG on Medicaid fraud. This interim, we had a hearing in Senate Health and Human Services where the estimate was around $5 billion in fraud just in the state of Texas. Now, I heard from a congressman yesterday, a Texas congressman who has been appointed to the Department of Government Efficiency. I believe he's flying down to potentially meet with our office and others just to get ideas. Do you feel like you have the tools to, and how do you work with the OIG's office? You know, there's a handoff there at one point, and how y'all work with this. And so maybe Brent needs to answer.
Yeah, Brent's
this.
more involved in that. I'll let him answer.
But I do think, Madam Chair, it's super important. You know, if you look at the cost in our budget, I think we're Medicaid and CHIP is roughly $75 billion in the state of Texas.
Well, in the last 2 years, our civil Medicaid fraud division has, I think, quadrupled the cases that they have brought. So we have been ramping up the number of actions we're bringing against bad actors in this space. Of course, we also have our Medicaid fraud control unit, which deals with criminal prosecutions, both at the federal and state level, which Josh Reno as well, he manages. Between those two, we do spend a lot of time and put a lot of resources towards these bad actors. I would say my ask is that to the extent that any senator or anyone is aware of these potential allegations, bring them to us and we will fully investigate it. And if we can bring a case, we will definitely bring a case, either civil or criminal or both.
So there have been a couple of high-profile cases you might not be able to answer. I know the whistleblower that was involved in reporting Texas Children's Hospital has now, I think the feds have dropped their case against him. I believe y'all have a case against Texas Children's, or you're investigating in relation to SB 14, and if there is some miscoding and that they are doing an end around SB 14. I think, Senator Campbell, that was your bill. Can you speak to that at all, or is that not appropriate at this time?
That investigation is pending, and I would hate to divulge any information there as we're still investigating that. We are grateful to Dr. Heim, I believe is how you say his name, and his coming forward. It was absolutely wrong what happened to him at the hands of the federal government. That was a weaponization of the federal government against him just trying to do the right thing and let law enforcement know, including our office, about what was transpiring at Texas Children's. But our investigation is ongoing at this time.
Good. Well, you mentioned if some statutes that maybe it was thrown out, and if that is true, we would love to hear if we need to update some of our statutes on Medicaid fraud.
Well, so I will tell you that case was brought long before I was the first assistant, and we've had significant staffing changes. There was a strategic decision made early in that case to strip some of the pleadings out that would have been successful and narrow the case. I believe that was a poor legal strategy at the hands of some lower-level lawyers that General Paxton was not aware of this legal decision at that time. I think that set that case up for somewhat of a bad result. But as it stands right now, I believe we do have a strong statute. I would love to get you more information, though, directly on that case. It's been a while since I've discussed or been
Thank
briefed
you.
on that case.
Yeah,
I
I
can
think
provide that.
it's pretty important to understand that, again, we love our Medicaid providers and we want to work with them, but there are some outliers out there that do, and they do harm to the system, which then puts a cloud over the entire Medicaid program. Finally, is the high-profile case of Pfizer in 2023. Your office sued Pfizer for, I believe, over unlawful statements misrepresenting the effectiveness of COVID vaccines. Are y'all still pursuing that case?
So, yes, we are. We are going to be appealing the district court ruling. Unfortunately, we waited almost a year for a ruling from the district court in that case, and we just got a very short ruling. That judge is now no longer sitting on cases in that district. So it appears to have been a process of just closing down his cases, but we're confident we're going to win on appeal.
So our basis was state law claim, and
Say that again.
our basis for this claim was a state law claim. They have made the argument, Pfizer, that because federal law prevents litigation based on vaccines, if you have a vaccine, there's no liability, you don't have to test it. Apparently, you can say whatever you want about it. We don't believe that's true. We think this district judge is wrong and is saying that this federal law stops us from going after fraud, which we think this is, in the state of Texas. We think we have a really strong claim, and we're going to continue to pursue it because my goal is exposure. What did they do? We are pretty confident that they lied about the effectiveness of the vaccine. They said it was 95% effective. We think it was significantly lower, and they knew it. And then when there were people coming out to say, hey, you're not telling the truth, then they tried to censor people. So we think we have a legitimate claim under state law, and we're going to pursue that as long as we can.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Betancourt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General Paxton, you mentioned a couple numbers when you opened your statement today. You mentioned $20 billion. I assume that's everything that you have collected since you've been in office. Was that what that number was?
It was 6.8 billion was the total for 10, and 4.4 for the last 4 years. So we've gotten better. I mean, I've had a little practice now. I've gotten better at this job. So it helps.
I was going to go to the 4.4 number too, because that's not in your written documentation, but that's what you've been able to generate in the last 4 years.
Yeah, and those numbers are historic. Those numbers have never been. These numbers are significantly higher than has ever been generated by our office. We've gotten better at it, and with the help of having lawyers that are talented, both inside and outside, I think those numbers can continue to get better and will benefit the state of Texas. And it's deserving. These big companies are used to just walking over people, and they should be held accountable too. I want businesses in Texas. I'm total pro-business, free market, but when you are deceptive, you need to be held accountable. And individuals cannot afford to take on these big companies. It is only Texas. Other states can't afford it. And the federal government often won't do it. We are the only line of defense to stop some of these big companies from abusing our constituents.
Well, I think it's important because you have to have the talent, okay, and you have to have the technology, but also specifically the strategy, as Brent mentioned. It has to be correct when you enter into a case. Now, what you have piqued my interest, however, is you've got on the Medi case, you had a contingency fee of 10.2%, so that's effectively a 9-to-1 payout, roughly.
Yeah, and the state had literally no risk. That's part of the reason we did it. We didn't have the money to pay the experts, so they front all the costs. So the 10.2%, as Royce would know, is not all profit. They had to pay all the experts. They had to fund ongoing costs. We didn't fund any of that, and so
they had to take the risk of doing that as well.
Yes, exactly. They may have gotten nothing.
Right, because that could have been the answer. Because the answer, when you go into trial, you never know what the verdict's going to be. But the point is, so that case cleared in the spring, and you mentioned that we're paying interest. What rate of interest are we paying?
Michelle probably knows. Michelle, can you answer that question? I don't know what the interest rate. If you know it, you know it.
Well, that's kind of important.
It's a fluctuating number. I don't know. It's not static. I don't think. It's some comptroller number, but I don't know how they get it.
Well,
all I know is it costs us money.
Yeah, obviously that was my question. So to find out how much money it's costing us, because you've got a case that's already settled, you've got the money, and yet we're paying interest. So I'd like to know what we're paying. Because we do need to come up with a mechanism that in a case like this, when we're sitting on the cash, that we just don't sit there and continue to run up a bill, on interest bill for no reason, because all that's doing is costing our taxpayers money.
No, exactly. And also, we want to incentivize the best lawyers to come help us. And if we're sitting on their cash and they put all this money in, I mean, it costs them money to do this case. And as you said, we didn't take the risk. I didn't have any risk in this case. They did. And so I just don't want this message to be sent that, hey, we may not pay you. You may have been very successful. You take all the risks. You spend all
Or
the money.
it becomes a slow pay to the point where it affects their interest in getting involved.
Right.
Because it could take a year or more to get paid. Now, they'll factor in their cost of the risk to do the case and the expert witnesses, et cetera. But when you get to an extended payout term like this, if we're running up a 1-year interest rate on $142 million, it's going to add up real money. And it could be, if it's 9%, that's close to, that's clearly double-digit millions, which we don't need to incur a cost for the taxpayers on a successfully won case already. I do think we're going to have some type of oversight because, Madam Chair, because what you're looking at here is if you make a payment, we'll have to have some, legislative oversight to be able to do that. But the sooner the better, because once we won and we have the cash, it's better to pay them off and not incur the cost, unless I'm missing something.
No,
So
we're fine with
fundamentally
oversight.
obvious, I'm trying to make sure.
I just don't want to hang them out to dry when they put in their time, their effort, their money. And
Right.
I want to incentivize firms to come. And look, they compete for this business, and we negotiate with them. We didn't pay them 35%. They're getting 10.
No,
1.2.
again, 10's, because that's a 9-to-1 payout, so that's certainly a substantial ratio. Now, so if you can get that interest payment, I'm just going to want to use this as an example of what we
Senator
need.
Bedcourt, I'm just going to interrupt because you're talking about this interest payment. First of all, the legal fees are all paid from the front. The legal fees aren't paid out.
No, I'm just
like
talking
the
about
rest
the
of it.
judgment payout.
Well, there's disagreement over whether the Prompt Payment Claim Act even applies to this and that
Okay.
whether there's interest accrued. State's going to pay its bill, okay? This is all about an appropriation. As you know,
No,
we can
I
only
just-
do appropriations when it's time to appropriate.
No, I'm just,
Okay,
if we've got
We spend a lot of time on this. We're going to pay it. We just have to pay it through an appropriation, and there's no way to appropriate, right?
you're right, you have declared the $38 million off the table, you're now declaring this problem off.
Well, I'm not declaring it. I'm just
Okay.
saying we're going to pay it.
No, I know,
You know?
I'm just trying to make sure that we understand.
Wherever the lawyers are, we're going to pay our bills, but
Right.
we can't just write you a check. It's not
No,
the way
no,
it
no,
works.
I'm really looking for the
Yeah.
mechanism to,
And we don't think there's interest involved here.
oh, you don't think there's interest?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
Now, there may be
they
other
think there's
lawyers who
interest?
disagree, but that's going to be,
Okay.
hopefully that's their position too, since they're going to represent us, yeah.
Well, they said interest, so that's why
Well, some
I'm
people
asking.
disagree with that, including, well, anyway, I'm not going to, just saying, well, it's another thing that's going to get worked out, but the lawyers are going to get paid for what they did, yeah.
Okay.
A lot of money, and maybe it's too much, so,
Okay.
but we're still going to have to pay it, so.
All right, I've got one
You can
more
ask
question.
all the questions you
May I proceed? Thank you.
You can proceed until 10 o'clock tonight.
No, well,
Not 10 o'clock.
yeah, Barbara. Senator,
Well, in 20 minutes, but I don't think we're going to finish DPS before that.
Senator West and I will be tied up doing that on another committee, Senator Crane's committee. Now, if we can resolve this idea that if there's interest or not, we'll take it offline and do it later.
We can work on that later.
Right. If you do think you're paying interest and what the rate is, I would love to know. And but the chair is correct. If that's not the case, then that's good news.
I really hope the chair is correct.
And well, let's all believe, okay? Because
What about if we just don't pay it? Then what are they going to do? They're getting $142 million. Maybe they'll be happy with that.
okay, well, that is the rhetorical
They
question.
can send us a bill for the interest.
Right of the moment. Now, let me go back to one thing that Senator Zaffarini said, which I think was important. I want to make sure that is your lap situation right now in the office on employees based in your mind on the salary situation? Is that why you've asked for 6%?
Yeah, we're competing. We're losing lawyers to obviously Washington right now, that higher salaries. I just want to make sure we have the talent, and right now we're losing, and I want to make sure we've kept that so that we can continue being successful. I mean, even in our 106 lawsuits against the federal government, we won over 3/4 of those cases because we had good people, really good people going toe to toe with the Justice Department. And now they're getting some of our best people.
Okay, and no, I want to compliment you first off on the success, as Senator West did, on the Medicaid, so the fact that your win ratio is well over 3/4 on your cases against the federal government. I assume we'll have less cases against the federal government.
Look, I sued Donald Trump when he became president. So if there are things
Right.
that I don't base it on, probably base it on what are they doing.
So
to
there
Texas.
hopefully can be little redirection of resources, but that's why I'm really asking, because if we can redirect resources and we have a capability of raising additional revenue.
The difference, though, when I sued him is he actually wanted to know why, and we had a discussion, and he actually switched sides. So that was very helpful. So
Well,
I
when
didn't
you
get
have
those
that-
conversations, unfortunately. I would have loved to have had them. I just
Well, no,
never.
when you have that direct access to the president, you can have that type of discussion. So I guess, and just the final point, I really appreciate the willingness to loan out Ms. French and Mr. Webster, because the problems that Senators Zaffarini and the Judicial Conduct Commission go back almost a decade. And it's really time that we figure out what that commission's mission needs to be, because we simply cannot leave non-performing, or in some cases corrupt, judges on the bench, because that damages the entire public's view of the entire process. So I really appreciate that.
I agree with you, and I do think that needs to be addressed because I've seen it, and there's almost no consequence.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Senator Alvarado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this one may be best asked to LBB, but on the victims' compensation claims, when is the last time that has been updated? I know Senator Kolkor has kind of touched on that.
Are you referring to the statute?
Well, yes. And then can you talk about the last time I think the cap is at $50,000?
We would need to double check. I don't have that off the top of my head. I can speak to the revenue side. Don't have the statute piece, but we can get that for your office.
Okay. And then to the Attorney General's office, General Paxton, the average number of days to make an award for the victims' compensation claims has increased from 42 days to now 90, or that's what's being proposed. Or
If you don't mind, Josh, if you can come over here and answer that one.
Josh, if you can shed some light on that.
But I apologize. I just popped in a minute. Are you referring to the new measures that we're proposing?
Yes.
Okay, so it's important for everyone to understand that previously the measures that LBB has required us to report mixed together two types of claim payments. One was sexual assault exams, and the other was crime victims' compensation payments. Sexual assault exams get paid very quickly because hospitals are really good about billing. They know how to do it.
We agree on that.
Yeah, they know how to do it, and they know how to get it to us rather quickly. It's an easy claim for us to review, and it's an easy claim for us to get in and out the door very quickly. So if anyone who's been sitting around Austin has seen the KXAN reporter who likes to talk about how terrible the Office of the Attorney General is for combining these two numbers, which is what we are required to report, which is why we are proposing to separate those out. Sexual assault exam report numbers can be one category, and the proposal that we're making is a separate category for crime victims' compensation payments, which, if I'm looking at, have gone down, and we continue to try to get these numbers lower and lower and lower. But when we were not functioning at a high level, those days to first payment were almost 180 days, a little lower than that. And so we're shooting for 90. I think that's a realistic number for us to properly receive an application, receive a bill, review it, and make a payment back to a crime victim. Does that make sense? Hopefully that answered your question.
A little bit, and we can have a conversation about that offline because the number of days for reimbursement for the forensic sexual assault programs was 0, and now that's going to 7 days. That's what's in the document here.
Correct.
Okay. So both of those are, the lag of time is increasing for both, for the victim's compensation and then the forensic sexual assault exam.
And I don't believe there was a category where we reported separately the sexual assault exams. And so if the fact that it's showing 0, I think, is because it didn't previously exist.
Okay. And we can talk about this later. I'm looking at page...
And I apologize. I do know that it's somewhat complicated. I just know that our numbers did not, I think, properly reflect the work that we were doing. And we want this body to understand exactly how long it's taking for us to pay separate categories of claims, one being sexual assault exams and the other being crime victims.
Let's talk about that a little later, but this is such an important program. Many of us refer constituents to that program. We kind of handhold them as they go through the process, so we want to make sure that it's as streamlined as possible.
Absolutely. Happy to work with you and visit more.
Senator Creighton.
General, appreciate your testimony and all your hard work, all of your staff, and your presentation. I had a question quickly, and then just a couple of comments about some of the success that you guys have been having on our behalf. Regarding the border, the federal government under President Biden put $186 billion into helping the Ukraine secure their borders. Is there a possibility that you could help us and your very capable staff negotiate with President Trump a $10 to $15 to $18 billion refund for what the state of Texas has done to secure this international border? And at the same time, with that refund, how do we continue to make sure that this administration will help us as fast as possible to build the wall, knowing that in the first term, they were successful in building about 300 miles of border wall, but we know that President Trump will be there 48 months. So with that, we have to be prepared. We have to get a refund. We have to use this friend that we have in office, a friend of Texas, to put us in a position to succeed, because at the end of the day, we may find ourselves alone once again after 4 years.
Yeah, and I think he'd be very open to that. Obviously, as Senator Huffman already mentioned, those are appropriations that we would have to go figure out how to do, but we will be in those conversations. I think it's a great idea. And the nice thing is we have conversations now. I've already talked to the president a couple times since he's been sworn in. And we also have I have a really good relationship. My office has a great relationship with Tom Holman, who's in the middle of all this. So if you have ideas, we have the communication that we haven't had for the last 4 years that I think will be useful in getting things accomplished, because we now have similar goals to protect our border.
Well, we know those relationships are strong, and whatever we can do as the governing majority in the Senate and as appropriators to help you accomplish that goal, I want to provide full support from my office in order to do so. Quickly on your presentations relaying the success of $10 billion plus, I see in my printouts, and more coming on the litigation that's protecting Texans. Just can't thank you enough for that success. And I always hear the GLO presenting they're the only state agency that provides a return to general revenue. I would have to say that there's another one. So
true.
We're very appreciative. We talk about our surplus quite a bit in the success of the economy, but with these numbers and certainly advocating on behalf of Texans, it's very much appreciated. I was very interested in the Meta settlement and that litigation where Meta had unlawfully captured and used biometric data of millions of Texans without consent. And I just think all of us are very concerned about, we talk about, TikTok and who owns it and, what's going on with the capturing and sale of data. And when everybody's just scrolling and getting their dopamine rush for the day, they have really no idea what is going on at behind the scenes on the intent behind all of these social media efforts. So I just want to tell you thank you there. The lawsuit quickly.
Can I comment real quick on that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Creighton. That was actually an idea I'd seen in Illinois pursuing this. And, we have bipartisan meetings, and I thought, what a great idea. And I found that we had a statute that was similar. A lot of states don't have that protection for their consumers. And initially, for several years, my staff, some of the people working for you, didn't really think this was a good idea. They told me it was a loser. I always knew it wasn't, and thankfully some of these people here pushed it forward, and it obviously was not a loser. But sometimes in the bureaucracies of the agencies we work in, you have to be persistent because there are bureaucracies even inside of our agencies in Texas.
Well, and we can relate to that, right? Every one of us has filed a bill in our past, in our experience, in our legislative tenure where we've been immediately told that bill will never happen. But we know it's the right thing to do on behalf of the public. And sometimes a public hearing is the victory because it puts sunshine on that particular issue, and getting it all the way across the finish line is a whole nother experience and gratifying, but you're accomplishing the thing.
The same was true for child support. It took me years to get the changes that I wanted. I had so much pushback. No one really wanted to change it. Let's just leave it alone. I knew it wasn't right. Senator Zeffironi, I knew it wasn't right. And I had to fight in my own office to get that done. And it took a long time because you're working on so many other things at the same time. And staying diligent on something that needs to be changed that's just another example of something we just stuck with it.
Well, it's a great segue, and really where I was going to wrap up is I worked for the Texas Attorney General many years ago in the Child Support Division as a CSO 1 and 2 and an investigator, and that's a division and an effort that's very near and dear to my heart. After I left that position, I was appointed to the CASA board in Montgomery County and kind of continued from there in a different chapter. But I just really appreciate what you've done in the child support division to make sure the most vulnerable kids in our state have what they need day to day. Thank you, General.
Thank you, Senator Creighton.
And does anyone else have any questions? Okay, then that's all we have for you, General.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for being here today. We appreciate your presence. All right, members, it's no use starting DPS. I don't think we can finish it in 7 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and break for session. Members, I'll make an announcement on the floor, probably be 20 minutes upon adjournment, just depending on how that wraps up. So for those in the audience, just pay attention. We'll be back after session. With that, we'll stand in recess. I don't see any point in starting.